It was a night painted in white and shadow. January 6, 1982. The town of Breckenridge, Colorado, a picture postcard ski resort high in the Rocky Mountains, was being buried. A fierce blizzard had descended, swallowing roads and silencing the world under a thick blanket of snow. The wind howled like a lonely wolf, and the cold was a physical thing, a predator in the dark. In a town built for winter wonderlands, this storm was different. It felt mean, it felt dangerous. And, on this particular night, it held a secret. A dark, chilling secret that would remain frozen in time for nearly 40 years. Out in that swirling chaos, two separate lives were about to intersect in the most tragic way imaginable. They were young women working hard to build their lives in this beautiful but sometimes harsh mountain paradise. They didn't know each other, their paths had never crossed, but the storm, and a predator hiding within it, would bind them together forever. Their disappearances would send a shiver of fear through the tight-knit community, a fear that would linger long after the snow melted. This wasn't just a story about a storm. It was a story about what the storm concealed. The mountains have a way of keeping secrets. They stand tall and silent, watching the world below. On that night, they watched as two women vanished into the whiteout. The search for them would begin as a desperate race against the elements, a frantic effort to find them before the cold claimed them. But the truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just the blizzard they were fighting against. There was something else out there, something human and far more terrifying than any force of nature. And so our story begins, on a night when the snow fell without end. It's a story of chance, of tragedy, and of a puzzle, with pieces scattered across decades. The clues were there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right technology to put them all together. But back then, in the heart of the blizzard, all anyone knew was that two of their own were missing, and the town of Breckenridge held its breath, praying for a rescue that would never come in the way they hoped. Bobbie Jo Oberholtzer was 29 years old. She was a free spirit, drawn to the mountains. She had recently married the love of her life, Jeff, and they were building a home together just outside of town. Bobbie Jo was known for her bright smile and her kindness. She worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, a common reality for many living in a resort town. On the night of January 6th, she had just finished her shift at a local real estate office. She decided to celebrate a promotion with friends at a popular Breckenridge bar, the Bobbie Saloon. It was a happy occasion, a small victory in a young life full of promise. Around 7:50 p.m., Bobbie Jo left the warmth of the bar and stepped out into the raging blizzard. Her plan was simple: hitchhike the short distance home. This was not unusual in 1982. In a small town like Breckenridge, hitchhiking was a common and trusted way to get around, a sign of the community's close-knit nature. She was last seen standing by the road, a thumb out, hoping for a kind driver to give her a lift through the storm. She was just a few miles from the safety of her new home and her waiting husband. She never made it. Meanwhile, across town, another young woman was finishing her own workday. Her name was Annette Schnee. At 21, Annette was shy and sweet, a recent arrival to Breckenridge. She had moved there just a few months earlier, hoping for a fresh start. She worked as a cleaning lady at the Holiday Inn. Like Bobbie Jo, she was a hard worker, trying to carve out a life for herself amidst the stunning scenery of the Rockies. Her last shift ended around 5 o'clock p.m. She was seen later that evening at a local pharmacy, buying a snack. Annette's plan was also to hitchhike. Her destination was a different town, but her method was the same. She needed a ride. And in the swirling snow, a stranger's car seemed like the only option. She was last seen on the side of Highway 9, waiting patiently in the cold. 2 women, strangers to one another, were now in the same vulnerable position. They were alone on the edge of a dark highway with a blizzard growing stronger by the minute. They both placed their trust in the kindness of a stranger. It was a trust that would be fatally betrayed. As the hours ticked by, a quiet worry began to grow. Jeff Oberholtzer waited for his wife, Bobbie Jo. He watched the snow pile up outside their windows, the silence of their new home growing louder and more unsettling with each passing minute. When she didn't arrive, he knew something was wrong. Bobbie Jo was dependable. She would have called. He started making phone calls, his anxiety turning into full-blown panic. He called her friends, he called her work. No one had seen her since she left the bar. He then called the police. But in the chaos of the storm, there was little they could do immediately. The next morning, the world was a sea of white. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a pristine but ominous landscape. Jeff, unable to sit and wait, started his own search. He drove the route Bobbie Jo would have taken, his eyes scanning the snowbanks for any sign of her. Near the top of Hoosier Pass, a high mountain pass just south of Breckenridge, he saw something. It was a small collection of items lying in the snow, just off the road. His heart sank. He found his wife's backpack, her wallet, and a single wool glove. There was no sign of Bobbie Jo. The discovery of Bobbie Jo's belongings turned a missing person case into a major search operation. Police and volunteers fanned out across the mountainside. The search was difficult, the snow was deep, and the terrain was treacherous. Then, a tragic discovery was made. Bobbie Jo's body was found about 300 feet off the road, down a steep embankment. She had been shot. The vibrant young woman who had been celebrating a promotion just hours before was gone. The community was stunned. Fear had arrived in Breckenridge, but the horror was not over. As the search for Bobbie Jo concluded, another family was reporting a loved one missing. Annette Schnee had not shown up for work. She hadn't been seen since the night of the blizzard. The police now had 2 missing women from the same night. The fear in the community deepened. Was it a coincidence, or was something far more sinister at play? For 6 long months, Annette's fate remained a mystery. Then, in July 1982, a boy fishing in a remote rural creek miles away from Breckenridge found her body. She, too, had been shot. The discovery of Annette Schnee's body, 6 months after she vanished, confirmed the town's worst fears. They had a double murderer in their midst. The 2 cases were eerily similar. Both women were young, both had been hitchhiking on the same night during the same blizzard, and both had been shot and left in remote locations. The police were almost certain the crimes were connected, but they needed proof. They needed something to physically link the 2 victims together, to prove they had encountered the same killer. The answer, strangely enough, came from a piece of clothing. When investigators examined Annette Schnee's body, they found something that didn't belong. She was fully clothed in the work uniform she had been wearing the night she disappeared. But on her feet, she wore 2 different socks. One was her own, the other was a bright orange thermal-style sock. It was a small detail, but it immediately caught the attention of the lead detective, a man named Jim St. Louis. He felt it was important, he just didn't know why yet. He carefully collected the orange sock and placed it into evidence. The clue was so unusual that police decided to publicize it. They released photos of the orange sock to the media, hoping someone would recognize it. Perhaps it belonged to the killer, perhaps a friend or family member would remember seeing it. The image of that lone orange sock became a symbol of the case, a strange and haunting piece of the puzzle. But no one came forward. No one seemed to recognize it. The trail grew cold, and the sock was filed away. Another piece of evidence in a seemingly unsolvable crime. But the orange sock held a secret that no one yet understood. Back when Bobbie Jo Oberholtzer's body was found, investigators had collected her clothing. She was missing one of her socks. Detectives went back to the evidence logs from Bobbie Jo's case, and there it was. They had found her boots, but only one of her orange socks had been recovered. They compared the sock found with Annette to the sock that belonged to Bobbie Jo. They were a perfect match. It was the missing link. The killer had taken a sock from his first victim, Bobbie Jo, and put it on his second victim, Annette. It was a chilling signature, a way of tying his crimes together. With the orange sock linking the 2 murders, investigators were sure they were hunting for a single killer. This was a crucial piece of information. They now had a profile, even if it was kind of vague, of the person they were looking for. He was someone familiar with the mountain roads, someone who drove a vehicle capable of handling the blizzard, and someone who used the act of offering a ride as a trap. The police worked tirelessly, following every lead they could find. They interviewed dozens of people and chased down hundreds of tips. The investigation focused on several potential suspects over the years. There was a man who lived near where Annette's body was found. There was another who was known to have a history of violence. Each lead was pursued with hope, but each one led to a dead end. Alibis were checked, and stories were confirmed. One by one, the suspects were cleared. The case was turning into a frustrating series of false starts. The killer, it seemed, had been careful. He had committed his crimes during the chaos of a blizzard, a perfect cover for a perfect crime. For the families of Bobbie Jo and Annette, the years that followed were filled with pain and uncertainty. Anniversaries came and went, the seasons changed, the snows of winter returned to Breckenridge each year, a bitter reminder of the night they lost their loved ones. They lived in a state of suspended grief, unable to fully mourn because there was no justice. The person responsible for their pain was still out there, living a normal life, carrying a terrible secret. The community too lived with the shadow of the unsolved murders. As the years turned into decades, the case officially went cold. The files were packed away in boxes, the evidence stored and labeled. New detectives came and went, each one taking a fresh look at the case, but none could find the key to unlock it. The orange sock, the gun, the locations, the clues were all there, but they weren't enough. It seemed that the Breckenridge double murder was destined to become a dark piece of local folklore, a ghost story, told on cold winter nights. Justice, it appeared, had been buried along with the victims. Now, let's go back. Back to that chaotic night of January 6, 1982. While the families of Bobbie Jo and Annette were just beginning to worry, something else was happening high up on Hoosier Pass, not far from Breckenridge. It was a moment that seemed completely unrelated to the unfolding tragedy. A county fire chief, Dave Montoya, was navigating his rescue vehicle through the deep, drifting snow. The storm was at its peak, and visibility was near zero. Suddenly, his headlights landed on a man, stranded and desperate. The man was in deep trouble. His small pickup truck was stuck in a massive snowdrift, and he was suffering from the extreme cold. He was frantic, almost incoherent. He told the rescuer a strange story, claiming he had gotten lost and didn't know where he was. He seemed to be in shock. The fire chief, doing his duty, pulled the man from the snow and into the warmth of his vehicle. He drove him down the mountain, to the safety of a nearby town. The rescued man gave his name, Lee Phillips. He was a local mechanic. The fire chief saved his life that night. It was a dramatic rescue, but in the context of a major blizzard, it was not entirely unusual. People got stuck in the mountains all the time. The fire chief reported the incident and then moved on to the next emergency call. The name Lee Phillips was just one of many names in a busy night of rescue operations. No one connected the stranded mechanic on Hoosier Pass to the two women who had just been murdered. Why would they? He was a victim of the storm, just like everyone else. Or so it seemed. The incredible irony of this moment would not be understood for almost 40 years. On the very same night that he committed two brutal murders, the killer himself had to be rescued from the storm. He had driven up a remote mountain pass, likely to dispose of evidence or simply to escape, and had become trapped by the same blizzard that had provided him with his victims. The man who had shown no mercy was saved by an act of mercy. He walked away from that snowdrift a free man, his dark secret safe, leaving justice frozen on the mountain. Decades passed, the world changed. Technology that was once the stuff of science fiction became a reality, and in the world of criminal justice, one of the biggest changes was the use of DNA. In the 1980s, DNA evidence was not a tool available to investigators. But by the 2000s, it was revolutionizing how cold cases were solved. Detectives who had never given up on the Breckenridge murders decided to take another look. They went back to the original evidence, which had been so carefully preserved all those years ago. The investigators had a key piece of evidence, a bloodstain found on Bobbie Jo Oberholtzer's glove. They believed the blood belonged to the killer, who may have been injured during the struggle. They also had DNA evidence recovered from Annette Schnee's clothing. Using modern techniques, they were able to develop a full DNA profile of the unknown suspect. They had the killer's genetic fingerprint. But when they ran this profile through the National Criminal Database, there was no match. The killer had never been arrested for another serious crime. The trail, it seemed, had gone cold again. But then came another technological leap. Genetic genealogy. This new technique allowed investigators to upload the killer's DNA profile to public genealogy websites like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. These sites are used by ordinary people to build their family trees. The police were not looking for the killer himself, but for his relatives. If they could find a distant cousin, they could use old-fashioned genealogy research to build a family tree and work their way back to their suspect. It was like looking for a ghost in a vast network of genes. In 2020, they got a hit. The killer's DNA partially matched two individuals in the database. These people were distant relatives, but it was the break they had been waiting for. A dedicated team of genealogists and detectives began the painstaking work of building a family tree. They traced back generations, through birth certificates, marriage licenses, and census records. They were looking for a man who would have been living in the Breckenridge area in 1982. Their research led them to two brothers. One of them was named Alan Lee Phillips. The name Alan Lee Phillips meant something to one of the original detectives on the case. He remembered the name from a long-forgotten police report, the report about the man who was rescued from the snowdrift on Hoosier Pass on the night of the murders. Suddenly, a piece of the puzzle that had been ignored for decades clicked into place. Could it be possible? Could the man they rescued from the storm be the very killer they had been hunting for all these years? It was a stunning, almost unbelievable coincidence. Investigators needed to be sure. They began to secretly watch Alan Lee Phillips, who was now in his early 70s, still living in the same area. He was a retired mechanic, a seemingly ordinary old man. To get a sample of his DNA, they followed him to a Sonic drive-in restaurant. After he left, they collected a napkin he had used and thrown away. They sent the napkin to the crime lab for testing. The results came back, and they were a perfect match. The DNA on the napkin was the same as the DNA from the blood on Bobbie Jo's glove and the evidence on Annette's clothing. They had their man. In March 2021, nearly 4 decades after the terrible blizzard, police knocked on the door of Alan Lee Phillips. They arrested him for the murders of Bobbie Jo Oberholtzer and Annette Schnee. The news sent shockwaves through the community and brought a sense of disbelief and relief to the families who had waited so long. The man who had lived freely among them for 40 years was finally facing justice. In 2022, he was put on trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 2 life sentences. The story of the Breckenridge murders is a powerful reminder that justice may be delayed, but it does not have to be denied. It is a story of how the patient work of detectives, combined with the power of modern technology, can reach back in time and solve the coldest of cases. And it is a story of the most bizarre twist of fate. A killer, moments after committing his crime, being rescued by the very system he sought to escape. After 40 long winters, the secret of the blizzard was finally revealed, and the ghosts of Bobbie Jo and Annette could finally rest in peace.